Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay. Can maybe see me? Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Hello. Is that Jackie?
You can hear me.
I can.
Okay.
I see Cal is here and a few other people that. Oh, Lisa.
Good afternoon, Calvin.
Hi. Hi, Lisa. Can you hear me? She might have been unmute. We'll just wait a couple more minutes and see who joins us, and then we'll get going. Can everybody see the screen though? Does everybody have my screen in front of?
I can see it.
Great.
Yeah, I can see it.
So far there's 8 of us. We'll just wait another minute and then we can get going. Hopefully this will be a short one.
Karina, can you hear me?
I can. Who's this? Okay. I just unmuted, or I'm sorry, I just muted everybody because there was a little bit of background noise, but we have 11 people on the call right now, so someone's in a vehicle, I think, because I can hear the background noise. But if you guys want to mute yourselves, that way you can mute back in. I don't want to have to mute everybody because I'm going to need your input. I am going to take myself off this video though, because you don't need to see me. So we'll take that off. Okay, so I've unmuted everybody. It looks like we're good on the sound right now. So if it gets a little too busy, I'll just bounce back and forth if we can. So today, I hope those of you who are on the call were able to, if you weren't on the last call, at least able to review the recording, at least the final 30 minutes of the recording where we went over the whole program standards. We'll just do a quick review through the standards, and then we're going to head into the attachment B on the agenda, which is the first 2 articles. And then in the following meetings, we'll get through each of these articles and attachments and then be able to get everything ready to submit to the state. So I'm going to close this window out. And we'll just do this. And then this is our program standards template, our draft standards. And it is a DIS 751 program, which is a employer subscription agreement program, so that any employer who wants to participate and hire an apprentice, It's a one-page form for them to get into the program and have their apprentice attend classes and be trained under their purview. So that's the type of template we're working with in order to save time for employers who might not have 6 months to wait to get their own program approved with the state. Let's see. So the table of contents is the different attachments and then the entire articles that make up the program standards. And this is what that looks like. So each of these articles are a requirement in the template we went through in the last call and the recorded session, which I hope all of you received. If you did not, feel free to email me and I can send you a link to the recording. I link it to my YouTube to make it really easy for everyone to listen to that call. But we went through each of these articles in depth to explain what the content was. Let's see, and so there's a few more articles. And so what we're talking about today are articles that are within this attachment B. So we'll be looking at the term of apprenticeship and probation and wage schedules. And somebody's not on mute because I hear someone having a conversation. All right, just don't want you to be embarrassed. I'm not, but you might be. So let's see. And then just before we get to that attachment D, I just want you to recall here that it is an equal opportunity in apprenticeship. There is laws pertaining to equal opportunity in apprenticeship specifically. They don't differ a whole lot from regular selection procedures and requirements for regular employees, but each employer that's participating in the program will sign a pledge agreement that they are responsible for complying with the equal opportunity laws. And that pledge form is pretty simple. I'll just skip right over to it here. Looks just like this. So each employer will sign this form and this subscription agreement form when they want to employ an apprentice under the program. So it's 2 quick forms. That's what makes it nice with the 751 subscription agreement program. And then there's another form here called apprentice agreement that the apprentice signs along with the employer that the apprentice agrees to the terms of the program. And that's pretty much the 3 forms that are required for employers and apprentices when using this type of program format. So attachment B, what we're going over today in particular is this Article 1, term of apprenticeship and probation, and Article 2, wage schedule. So it should be pretty quick and easy from here on forward. But obviously there's going to be questions, but I'm going to do a quick review and then we can have a discussion and any questions. So this is the way the format reads in the templates. We've got to stick to certain legal terminology here, but the period of probation for this occupation shall be 6 months. This is a recommendation from the Division of Apprenticeship Standards, and there's also some requirements in California Code of Regulations for the amount of months in comparison to the program. So if this is a problem for any employer, now's the time to speak up. And then the term of apprenticeship program shall be as follows. I should say within this meeting, you want to speak up to this term of probation. And so the program term for the human resources professional, which might include any of these occupational titles. And I probably want to ask here if anyone has additional program titles that we want to include in here. This is where we want to include that. So if in this meeting it's decided there's other titles I might have left out, please let me know now. This all came out of ONET, so I'm hoping I haven't lost sight of any particular occupational title used within an organization for the HR person, maybe a clerk. I'm not sure what all we want here, but this is a skilled occupation. And so the expectation here is that a person in this profession, in these occupations, it would look like about 4,000 hours or 2 years of a full-time job for someone to master the skills of the occupation. So the idea here is that we're trying to master the skills within this 2-year period. And so the apprenticeship program would last 2 years. And now, that said, if you have an individual that's been working in that occupation and you want to admit them to the program for the sake of being able to have the courses that they're entitled to in the program, and to receive an actual state certificate or designation, then if that's the case, then you'll have to, you can put them in the program and then you can give them a certain credit toward the program. So we can give them hourly credit. For example, you can give them 6 months credit, you can give them 12 months credit. And since it's a 24-month program or a 2-year program, you can give them all the way up to 18 months of credit. If they've been working already there for 4 years, that's fine, but we can only give them 18 months of credit. So everyone has to be actually registered in the program for a minimum of 6 months, and that's a state rule. So just so everybody knows, there is the ability to give someone credit. Keep in mind, though, they'll have to complete these courses in that short of time. Can somebody put themselves on mute, because I'm getting a lot of background noise there. Sorry. And then the RSI hours, those instruction hours, which are here, and we'll be talking about this in a different meeting, and we're going to go in depth with faculty on these courses to get all your questions answered. And we can determine if other classes are also needed or not needed, but this is those amount of hours. So what that is equivalent to is the minimum required by this Division of Apprenticeship Standards, which is 144 hours for every 1 year of an apprenticeship program.
I have a good one.
And so in this case, it's 288 hours for the 2 years of the program. And it just so happens that these 5 courses also equal 288 hours. So we just got lucky on that. And then the wage schedule here, and what we're looking for here is to determine what a journey worker, HR analyst, or HR specialist, or generalist, what does that journey worker rate look like as a wage? And I'm just looking for like a ballpark. What we're trying to do here is determine what a minimum wage would be for an apprentice based on that journey worker wage, because this is what we have to provide in the standards. Is what does the journey worker wage look like, so we can determine what these minimum wages need to look like. And the reason why it's minimum wages is nothing to do with the minimum wage for the state or feds, but in that every employer is going to have your own wages, right? So we certainly don't want to require any employer to have any particular wages. This is not a prevailing wage apprenticeship program. What we're trying to do is give everyone the autonomy to offer the wages they want to offer, although as long as it's fair to your apprentices within your organization. But we want to have a minimum set that all employers need to have. And does that make sense? So if you tell me the journey worker wage is $28 an hour, we need to determine what's the minimum wage that every employer can pay based on that, right? And then I have to determine what the percentages are according to that. And okay. So I'm just going to move to this section here real quick. Actually, I'm just going to go through the whole Article 2, which is just about done. It only goes to here. And then we'll have a discussion on it. So just, if you have thoughts to it right now, just try to jot them down if you can, and then we'll go through them. And so looking at these 2 periods, what this looks like, and this is actually 12 months, is if an apprentice starts, they're in period 1, they've got 12 months, 2,000 on-the-job training hours with the employer, right? So you're paid for that whole year. So 2,000 hours is about a one year on the job if it's a full-time job. And then 144 hours of the educational hours here. And so they have to meet all of these 3 things. And this is that initial wage. And once they've met all 3 of these, then they move to the second step, or the second period. And then they finish with a new wage for the next 12 months, 2,000 hours and 144 classroom hours. And so once they meet this, they get to move up to the next step. Now, once they finish period 2, then they're starting at that point at the journey worker wage. So this is much like any other type of apprenticeship program, actually. And that's what we're required to do, is give them the ability to master some skills and support that that training for them, and then move them up on the wage scale as they master those skills until they're able to finalize, receive their certificate and their journey person card from the state, and at that point they're eligible to make the actual wage of the journey worker in that occupation. Participating employers offer a healthy a benefits package amounting to approximately what percentage of the hourly wage. So that's another thing we'll need to discuss today and try to I really want to narrow that down and have these highlighted areas established before the end of the call. And then advancement schedule. To advance from one period to the next, the apprentice shall have satisfactorily completed the following requirements: the on-the-job training hours, the months in the program, and the related supplemental instruction is here. So we're just talking about these three things here. Now we could break this down to 4 periods and 6-month durations, but I want to make sure it's not too complicated for employers that are a little more restricted on how they can do that wage increase. So if you already offer 6 months increases, you can always offer more than the minimum wage, and you can always have wage increases that are additional to this. But as long as we stick with what that minimum wage is in these 2 periods, you're okay. We can go in more in depth to explain that if you like. And then overtime provision is what the state requires. One thing here, though, I want to just briefly touch on is the time spent in class, those course hours. Labor code protects employers and the apprentices in which, or by stating within these program standards. So if with a state registered program, we're able to require them to go to school and take their classes outside of the work hours and the paid work hours. So this here indicates that the apprentice shall not be compensated for their time spent in class. That's much different than other employees who you send off to training and you have to pay them for the workday hours. Apprentices, that's not the case. And then lastly, work hours and working conditions. Again, it's the state labor law, and all of you in HR are already familiar with this, but straight time hours are 8 hours per day, 40 hours a week. And then all other applicable laws apply. And the same with your overtime. It's the same rate of 1 1/2 times the wage, wage rate, and you're all very familiar with what that is. So we won't go in. I'm not trying to be the labor code, the labor commissioner right now. So if we can start with just trying to tackle, if anyone has any questions or inability to meet the 6-month probationary period for a 2-year program, does anyone have questions, or does that complicate things for anyone that we might need to open up a discussion on that? Feel free to unmute yourself if you need to.
Sure.
Sorry about that. Does anyone have any questions? There's 14 people on the call, and I guess everybody's okay with that. I don't want to unhighlight it until I'm absolutely sure. Maybe it's me. I'm trying to. It might have been me. I think I had everybody muted. Does anyone have any questions, or if you want to write into the group chat, you can do that too.
It's good.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. It was me muting everybody. All right. And then this journey worker wage rate. Can you all help me with understanding perhaps what this wage might look like for these types of titles, occupational titles? Does anyone want to speak up? Should I call on somebody? Jackie.
Hello. Can you hear
Hi.
me?
I can. You guys are
Just
scaring me. I'm starting to think nobody's been hearing me all this time I've been talking.
no, I totally can hear you. I totally was muted and
All
I
right.
was listening to everything. You want to
Okay,
ask
great.
your question one more time?
Well, I'm just curious if somebody can kind of give me an idea of what this journey worker wage might be that would seem normal for everyone on the call. Like if I were to say an HR analyst makes like $28 an hour, is there anyone who couldn't make that work? If somebody can't make it work, then we need to lower what that is. Now, again, employers can pay whatever they want. We just need to
Mhm.
find what that minimum is for everyone. So
Right. I think a lot of the time what I've been seeing is that that HR analyst is one of the higher ones, but that they're location based. So depending on where you work, it could be higher or lower. That's not.
And I would
So
say that
28 is a
I
good
don't,
starting standard, but for an
would the
analyst,
coordinator be less? The HR
yes, a
coordinator
coordinator would be
lesser.
less from what I've seen. And a generalist is pretty much almost up there with the analyst.
okay. And so are we looking to train then coordinators? Is that it? Or do we want to be more particular in what these occupational titles would be under this apprenticeship? We could be more intentional. We can take some of these out if we feel like it's not where the gap is, or if they're even. Go ahead.
Is the coordinator too low? The rest of these I feel are at all about this. Well, maybe the coordinator and the employment representative are at the same level, and the others are higher than those.
Okay. Does
But I
everybody?
feel like there's different levels, like an HR representative, then an HR generalist, and an HR analyst. Those are different levels of HR
Right,
based upon years of experience.
right.
Okay.
Or depending on the duties that you're doing,
That too.
the responsibilities that that person is
So do we need to maybe put in what the lowest pay would be for a coordinator? Because we're talking about a minimum, right? So if we were to look at it not as starting off as an analyst, because that's higher, if we were to look at a coordinator and say how much do we pay and typically pay an HR coordinator, and that's the minimum, and then anything above that could be considered.
Well, and if here's another thing we could do. If you feel like there's some occupations there that is a different level, we could build 2 occupations into this and then break it out into like an attachment B and an attachment C. And maybe the next attachment we have analysts and generalists. And then, this is something that I'm not real sure of. So this is exactly the reason why I have you
that
all.
might be a good idea because you can't set one for all of them and have them, but there are different levels for each of them that carry different responsibilities and I don't think that I think okay, so as an example, you try to get an HR even so the coordinator or assistant, you have to have a certain amount of confidentiality. So there would be that base level, but not minimum wage level, I guess is my thought.
Okay. So we could break these down. I mean, if it's this, the purpose of this is to get a designation for each person, for each individual going through this. So if we want, we can do 2 different occupational titles. We can do a representative / coordinator, and we can do an analyst / generalist. I was kind of, hoping we would get to some of this in these calls. So this is great. But if there's a need for both, or if do you feel like the representative and the coordinator is someone just comes in entry level and no real coursework might not be as applicable, but when you want to bring them to the next you know, level, you know, as far as a generalist or analyst, is that the apprenticeship we should be focusing on, and what does that look like? We could build both and have someone can certainly. Who's ever driving? Can you put yourself on mute, please? Thank you. So we could do both, and then you could have someone in an apprenticeship twice. You know, maybe you start them as an HR representative. They do 1 year. Maybe it's a 1 year. Maybe does it take only 1 year to master the skills of a representative? And then if that person's been working in an occupation for a while, and you have an availability for an analyst or a generalist, then you can, you know, bring them into the next apprenticeship. And it's very flexible. It really just depends on what it is you all feel you want out of this, because this is.
I think you're right on with that, is that it's kind of the scope. Like, do you feel like an HR apprenticeship program can take you to the level of an analyst, or does that take more time, and maybe the occupational titles are higher than that or lower than that, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
It could be that. I don't think a personnel officer, after 2 years of an apprenticeship program, I don't know that title, you would get that title. That seems higher than.
And we could take all of this off. It was really just to continue to have the conversation.
No, right, to get the ideas. Yeah.
This is Marissa in Coalinga. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So my thought is just most of the time, and I know everybody does it different, but in most instances, an HR analyst is going to be required to have a bachelor's degree, because they're writing policy, they're analyzing policy, they're making decisions that affect the entire HR of a company. And so I don't know if you'll ever get to that level with an apprenticeship program. So generally the structure as an HR generalist is lower than an HR analyst, and they perform very general functions. They're not HR specialists because they're not assigned to one area of HR, but they have to know a little bit of each function. And I think that's the level that you'll get to with an apprenticeship program more than an HR analyst. Every organization's different, but generally, if you see a job announcement for an HR analyst, it's going to require them to have a bachelor's degree.
As well as prior years as a generalist.
Right.
Okay.
So I think what you have there, the top 4 are probably our scope, and the ones below HR generalist require them to be working as one of those positions above before they can. And then the apprenticeship, you're right. I agree with the bachelor's degree. Personnel analyst, HR analyst, and HR specialist, they pretty much have bachelor degrees. Yeah. Don't take the recruiter off yet, though. I don't know that I would take that off yet.
And I do feel like some of what's happened over time is that we have, in our really rural area, we do have some small farmers who are trying to make, you know, this HR occupation work for them. And they don't necessarily find themselves in a position to hire someone with a bachelor's degree at the wages that would command. So they were looking at how an apprenticeship might work for them. But I do also think those are few and far between. So if we're talking about giving folks a leg up to entering the field, and then perhaps we do just work with this with these 4 titles. Is that what I'm hearing? And then we should remove these others from this particular program?
I wouldn't remove the HR specialist.
No?
No.
I thought I heard, was it Marissa, did you say that a specialist was a little more?
No,
Oh, okay.
No, for us, generally our structure is like an HR assistant, and then an HR specialist, and then an HR generalist, and then an HR analyst.
So is it these that I should be removing then, except maybe not the recruiter?
Yeah, and I apologize. I can't see what everyone's looking at. My computer has working since I got to work this morning, so I'm listening, but I can't see what everyone else is seeing.
Then I'll just say out loud. So HR generalist, and I do see some other people are only on the phone, so I don't think you're the only one. But the HR analyst, generalist, and then there's personnel analyst, which I'm assuming is the same as an HR, and then personnel officer, and then the other two were corporate recruiter and recruiter. So would it then make sense to remove a generalist and analyst and the personnel officer? We'll start with those. Does everybody agree?
I wouldn't.
No?
No.
I wouldn't remove generalists. I would
Okay.
I would remove analysts
All right, we'll take that out.
and the officers.
Okay, we'll take these out. So now we've got an HR representative, an employment representative, HR coordinator, HR specialist, HR generalist, corporate recruiter, and recruiter, which we could just say recruiter. I don't think it.
I think those are good.
Yeah? Okay. All right.
I agree.
All right. So, and these are pretty much all falling in the same scope, is what I'm hearing. And
I
so
think
this-
a recruiter, when I think of a recruiter, I think of an analyst. I know there's analyst positions that do recruiting.
Do people feel like a recruiter typically also would have a bachelor's degree?
Yes.
Okay, then we probably want to
So
remove it.
I would say no, because that was my entry level position into HR
Oh,
before I ever had a college degree, was a recruiter for a staffing agency. And in public employment, I work for the city, so my setup's going to be a little bit different than everybody else. But for us, a recruiter, like when I worked at West Hills College and now at the city of Coalinga, is now, we don't use that title, but recruitment is a function performed by an HR specialist. And so that's the lower level. And the analyst doesn't do any recruitment functions except for overseeing that the policies are correct for the recruitment process, but they're not involved in actual recruitment.
I guess here's the other question then. Do we feel like there's this need for it?
I think it depends on how big an organization is.
Mm-hmm.
You know, someone may have someone who's just assigned to doing recruitment, but they may not. I mean, if they may have them function as an HR generalist and one of their duties is recruitment, but I think it may be good to leave in there just because, in case you have a large employer who just wants someone who focuses on recruitment.
Mm-hmm. And then we could leave it there for the sake of those employers who do hire in that occupation folks that might not have, have the bachelor. Maybe the bachelor's degree is not their requirement for that job.
Right.
So, okay, well, we can leave it. And then Debbie has put something in the chat. I think we also need to consider the area market we live in, which has a lot of ag-based and seasonal positions. Mm-hmm. And that is true. That's something I was talking about too, is that, sometimes it's employers that are, just are looking at how do I fill this gap or fill this need, but yet, I don't have, I don't know, $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year position with benefits package to offer. So that does happen, but I'm not sure how often it does. I just know I've heard that a couple of times now. If this is a learning apprenticeship, then the starting wage for an HR coordinator is going to be lower than 28. Okay, so I guess that's the next question is what does that wage look like for these folks? If they were already working in that position for 2 years, what would you typically look at to pay them? And we're just looking for the minimum among everyone.
So I think this is Debbie, or I typed that before you had split out the positions, or when it was kind of lumped into one.
Oh, and I just saw it, so sorry about that.
Yeah, but I think, and maybe I'm misinterpreting something, but I think we want to make sure we hit the minimum so this is usable for other employers, right?
Exactly.
So we don't want to price ourselves out of the market for, if you run across an ag client who's trying to build up their HR staff and their HR department or even get one, that they would be able to use it based on the wages that they're able to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say I work in the public sector, so I have no idea what private employers are paying, so I can't give you a realistic number other than to tell you that my best friend works as an HR generalist for a solar company and out of Visalia, but they pay her $19 an hour.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's a realistic number, but I personally think that 28 might be kind of high.
28 does sound really high, you guys, because I worked as a generalist in the valley. I'll say in the valley, but I made 25 as a generalist.
Mm.
And I would say even 19 as a coordinator in Visalia. That's pretty good. I've heard a lot lower. I've heard 16 and I've heard 17.
Yeah, I was thinking 16.
Yeah, I've heard them.
But I haven't
Pretty low.
looked at the wages for this level of position for quite some time. It's been at least 5 years, but I think 16 is what I last considered a coordinator for.
So what we
And that might be good, because I think that if, you know, like she said, they can always pay more, but if you set it too high, it may prevent some employers from participating.
Mm-hmm.
And this again is the journey worker rate, so it's not as firm as what we're making the apprentice wages, but I can tell you what we do need to consider is the initial wage for someone coming in. It's about to be $15 an hour. So I know that the state doesn't want to be giving out credentials to people for jobs that aren't going to pay, or aren't considered middle skilled and living wages. So I want to just I'm kind of wanting to recommend that we go with 15 an hour, because by the time this program gets approved, that's what it's going to be looking at in most areas of the state. So if we started at $15 an hour, and then after the first year, what does that pay bump look like? And I know in some agencies, or governmental agencies anyway, there's, you know, annually they bump them up about 5%. But again, we just need a minimum for everyone here. You can always pay more. And so does anybody have a problem with starting at 15?
I think it's kind of low. I would have said 16.
But if 16 is already the journey worker rate, then what do they have to achieve? You know what I'm saying? That's kind of the goal there. Is what this is someone who you would assume is entry level. We're getting them through their courses, but we definitely want to make it worth their while to stick out the program and stay with you. You know, I think if you really want to retain them and develop them to stay, we need to figure out what that looks like. And it's okay to have a higher standard. You know, I mean, if some employers just can't make it work, then there may be some employers, unfortunately, that are going to have, you know, come up with another plan. And do we want to have a higher standard? Do we want to have something so low that it doesn't, you know, that folks wouldn't be able to live on it or want to stay? You know, maybe they get a year's worth of experience and then they're offered $19 an hour somewhere else, and then they leave the program and they leave you as an employer after you spend a year trying to develop them. So we got to think about all those aspects, you know, when we're deciding what these wages need to look like.
So is it, help me, I should know this, this is Debbie, but is it 2022 that minimum goes to 15 or 21? You know, I guess my point is, I don't know if we want to put 15 if it takes long enough to get this approved and then we're coming out matching what minimum goes to for someone who's gone through school, a professional. You know, maybe we do want to put the entry a little bit higher.
Right, exactly. That's what I was thinking, is it just shouldn't start out at minimum wage.
Right, and you remember in some counties it already is 15. So we've got to think about, you know, do we want to, you know, incorporate a wage that where all, you know, folks in the other counties can also join the program. But this, again, it's your decision. Because you all are the ones.
Do we have anyone from the staffing firms that has these types of wages, like you know, that does this type of comp study?
Who's on the
phone?
Apple One. Who's this? Albert, are you on the phone?
Yeah.
Albert, you're not on the call? Oh, how about, oh, Jackie?
I'm here.
I know you're working under a.
No, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Do you
Okay.
have, what are your thoughts? I know you've got a lot of
Well,
thoughts.
I agree with, I believe it was Debbie. I just don't think setting it too low. There's got to be, there are people, I'm going to tell you, the places that I see that are advertising for a coordinator and they have their wages so low, it's that expectation of work is so high, nobody's going to want to do it. Just nobody. You're not going to get somebody in there that's going to want to work for the $15 an hour, and the scope of the work is so intense that their expectation is so high. That's why I was saying $16 an hour is a little better. If minimum wage is going to be 15 in a year, you got to put it above minimum wage, and then at least 19 by the time you're done with the program.
As the journey worker, maybe the wage needs to be 19 then?
I agree with the 19.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that
I
makes
haven't
sense
touched
too.
wages for like 5 years, so sorry.
And let me just tell you, on this journey worker wage, this could be the top of your wage range for this. It doesn't have to be the lowest number on the wage range. It could be the highest. It doesn't make the difference to DAS. What we need to do is determine this for me to come up with what these minimum percentages are going to be. But really, what makes or breaks the program is what these minimum wages are for the apprentice in those two periods. But this I can always decide, based on what we've got going here. Again, not as crucial, because everybody's going to pay what they're going to pay to their journey workers. The state's not telling you what to pay to your journey workers. What the state's saying is, what are these two wages going to be? And then anyone in the program is going to pay these two wages or above. So you're welcome to say, well, we're in San Francisco and we're going to go ahead and start our apprentices at 18 and next bump them up to 19, whatever they want, as long as they meet the minimum. Is that clear? If I'm confusing anyone, let me know.
Yeah, I maybe have been confused about that. But yeah, I do think it's location based.
So if we said 16 and then bumped them up, say 5%, and I'm just throwing some things out here. So 16 and $1.28, so $17.28, something like that, or we can even say 17.25. Does that sound like a wage that someone would aspire to continue in the program and move to the second period and spend that additional year continuing to learn in order to get their credential?
We are talking about the coordinator, right?
Any of these occupations here.
I wouldn't say this would be for a generalist at all, or a specialist. I think that's too low.
Okay. If you were just starting out though, Jackie, like say you're going into a generalist position with little to no experience, and you certainly didn't have much coursework. And if you did have a couple courses, that's great. But
yeah, but I happen to agree, I believe it was with Debbie again earlier, that a generalist would require a bachelor's degree. And then if we're talking about a generalist with a bachelor's degree, you can't walk in the door at 16. They're not going to go lower then. They're going to have...
I think some of the ag employers, though, just call it an HR generalist when they have them doing HR assistant work, HR coordinator work, sometimes HR generalist work. So I think they just use that term broadly as an HR professional. So I think we need to be careful not to outprice, like we talked about, outprice the employer. Because we call an HR generalist within our field, we call it something and we define it as something. Not everybody defines it as that.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I worked as a generalist in the farming industry for $25 an hour.
Yeah, and I have an HR apprentice right now starting in January, and she's been working as a generalist, and that's the title they gave her with the food manufacturing company. And she just got to $15 an hour.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, in a very small town, but that's just the
Yeah.
reality. So, you know,
I think the starting wages we have here are pretty accurate because knowing that they're just the minimum, like it doesn't mean that people have to pay $16 an hour. They can pay 25. Are you concerned that they will pay them too low because that's what they see on the paper?
I'm
Maybe that's
thinking
what
they
they
won't
think.
want to join.
well, I think that's what it is right there. Is we want to ensure that an apprentice who's being shared these wages as part of a program, that they'll say, oh, this is my foot in the door. This is a wage I can manage as an entry-level person, and then but not leaving folks out because they can't even imagine living on a wage while they're trying to learn. And it's not to say that, you know, that they wouldn't, but we want to keep them engaged in the program. And one thing we don't want to do is have people making $14 an hour and then, you know, come month 9 and all this work we put into them and then they quit because they can't afford to live, you know.
Right.
So any other thoughts? There's a lot of people on this call and I'm not getting
Yeah, I would like to hear some other opinions towards this wage because I'm really not hitting the mark here.
No, I think it's been great though what you guys have provided, because none of this I could have come up with on my own. This is kind of what I'm thinking. This minimum corresponding wage, maybe 16, and then 17.25 is about a 5% increase. And then you would assume that once they finish the program, then they're bumped up to a minimum of 19. Now, of course, again, every employer can make that decision. Hello?
I would think that some people are going to be working towards certifications, and based upon the experience that they're getting, and if they're in HR, they're going to be looking in the market in regards to what their experience is going for, and they may not complete the full program if it's starting off at a lower rate. But then if that's only the starting rate, then that's up to that employer whether or not they would actually start them at that rate, and or if they're going to start them at a higher rate just to retain that person. So it's allowing it to be flexible based upon the different markets. But then it will be up to the employer to start it at a more higher rate. It would just be more of what would the cap for this be.
And then that's exactly right.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, my name is George. I'm an HR intern.
Hi, George.
Hey, I make about $16.50 and I have a bachelor's degree. I graduated, so I mean maybe that helps to start. I started off at 16. I'm sorry?
Where?
What county? What county are you in?
I'm in San Bernardino County. I work for a water district in Rancho Cucamonga.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess what we're looking.
This is Randy Kay from ILG, and I just want to echo what I'm hearing about making sure this works statewide and making sure that this can be beneficial to more rural areas and to our urban areas. So I definitely think we've got to keep pace with minimum wage, but also make sure it's on the lower end because everyone can go higher. So I appreciated the conversation, and I agree with kind of where this is headed. And I just want to thank you.
Thanks, Rankin. Well, and to George's comment, I do think I think what may be different in your case is you already have a bachelor's degree. So you have to command more money because you've just finished a bachelor's program. And these individuals may not have done that. Like the assumption here is that it's a company that's saying, I want to help develop a workforce in HR and doesn't have a need to necessarily hire, say, 2 or 3 people all with bachelor's degrees who command a higher wage. That would only make sense. So if they can develop them internally and build their own pipeline, then do they pay them, lower than what someone coming out of a university would require? Now, that being said, it brings us back to the other person who made a comment, and I didn't get her name, but that do we want to just go ahead and go with the minimum wage at 15 because again, it's flexible so that we're able to invite people from areas. So we can certainly do that. And then again, each employer, so what's great about this is that in this worksheet here, in this employer subscription agreement, any of you who decide I'm going to register an apprentice, we're just going to have these 2 periods here, and you'll be able to tell us what your wages are going to be, just right here. So as long as the wages you're putting on this subscription agreement are this amount or higher, then you have no problem at all. What'll happen here is if they're lower, then when I get the form and DAS gets the form, they're going to say, you're not meeting the standard. So you either adjust it or, you adjust it. So you probably need to fix that on the form. But anyway, this is what'll happen is you'll go ahead and state here what you are actually paying. And then your apprentice is obviously going to know what you're going to pay them because they're agreeing to start. So as long as you provide them with your scale, then they'll be okay. So if you like, we can just make this 15. And then if that's the case, do we just bump it up to say 16, or would everybody be okay with their second year in paying them at minimum 16? Is that good? And then again, anyone can pay over and above that. Should we stick with that? I thought I had like a little, I thought there was like a little voter button here. Let me see if I can find a little voting button. Maybe just do a vote.
So do other apprentices program in the state have a single rate throughout the state?
Sometimes, but again, a program like this type of template program, the 751 program, it leaves it flexible for employers to pay more.
Okay.
And then we can always revise too. So, we can look as a committee, we can meet, a couple times a year. And then if we feel that conditions have changed in the market in a couple of years, we can go back and take another look at it and submit a revision. In fact, for anything, we can submit a revision.
Well, I teach at West Hills. I could see where 16 wouldn't be bad here, but my daughter goes to USC and her rent's twice as much as mine for a 900-foot apartment as opposed to my 1,500 square foot house. So I could see where they'd have trouble attracting people in a urban area.
Yeah.
Looking at that way.
Right. But these standards may not actually be reviewed by an apprentice. I think what needs to be determined is putting those wages perhaps in your job description when you post the apprentice position. If you're going to post a position, you may just be hiring somebody internal into that position. But so long as those wages are what your standards say, then we'll be okay. And I think that's what we're trying to do. And I think that was Brian on the phone. But I feel, hi Brian. But I feel like it's okay because this is what we're doing is just establishing that base minimum and what that step increase minimum needs to be so that everybody can play. So if everybody's okay with that, I'm trying to find the voter button on here, and I thought I'd found it once before, but now I can't seem to find it. But I guess what I need is everybody to, maybe it's in the chat. No, it's not in the chat. So maybe if those of you who have the chat in front of you, I guess or maybe if everybody can unmute yourself, and if everybody is okay with that, I just need to take a vote.
There's a yes, no button if you click on the participants, you can click yes, no, raise your hand.
Is that what it is?
But that's only for those on the computer, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at my. Yeah.
I'm seeing people hitting yes or no.
I'm seeing you guys hit the yes or no. So I guess let's just go with that. And if anyone isn't able, oh, good. So it's working, and I didn't even have to do anything. I love this. And we're only 7 minutes shy of the end of the call, so it's coming along just great. So I've got 14 participants, including myself, on the call. So I myself am not a voter on the committee. So the rest of you want to make your votes, and if you can't, I don't know, send me an email or something. We'll get this figured out. And then I'll work on the percentages here. And the last thing I need to do while we're tying this up here is just this, if somebody can let me know what they think the benefits package percentage might be for an individual like this. And it just is an approximate amount. So what does that look like? Is it 15%? Is it 25? I have no idea. This is definitely something that you all are experts in. So if I can just get an approximate amount of what the benefits would be as a percentage of the wages, that would be helpful. Again, it's approximate and it's going to be different for everyone, but I really don't even know where to start. Like I think for our classified employees, sometimes it's 50% of the wages. Is that about right? Should I just put a blanket 50% in there? As somebody says, I do not have any idea either. Thanks, Lisa. I'm the only one. I'm going to put 50%, and I think if anyone wants to chime in as a reason why not, feel free. How about that? Would that make it easier? No, I've got 5 yeses and 1 no. So if anybody else wants to vote, or if you're able to vote, or if you want to
This is Cal. Adriana and myself will not be voting due to we work for the division.
That's true. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay. All right. So we have 5 minutes left in the call. Does anyone have any other input or questions? I'll leave this at 19. Again, if somebody doesn't pay that rate, this is not dire. What the state's going to hold us accountable to is these minimums, and then we'll put in the percentages as well. I'll do that based on those factors. Any other questions in the last couple minutes? So thanks everybody for the call. And next week we'll be next week. I think it's next month, right? So we got December 11th. We're going to go over Article 3, and we'll vote on that as well. And this is Article 3 is this work training. So I'm going to send, after this meeting, I'll send everybody out the current draft with these additional figures in it. And then if you could sort of compare your job descriptions for these roles to this different work training we've outlined here, we'll try to make a determination on, we could add more of these if we need to, we can take some away, we can rewrite them. Feel free to email me any of your suggestions that may be better to have it ready before the meeting, just for the sake of time, and then we can determine what these hours look like as far as mastering these skills. We can break this down a whole lot better. This is where this next meeting may take a little more work, but if you want to get prepared ahead of time, that'd be great. And we'll take a vote on that at the end of the meeting if we have time. And it may need to be an extended meeting. We'll just see where it goes. But this is really where a lot of the work is. You all are the ones who know what this work looks like better than I do. So you may want to bring the job description to the meeting so we can make sure we're capturing all these different skill sets. So that's what we'll be doing in the next meeting. And with that, if no one has any questions, and you can always call me, and if you want my number, it's on the email, but it's also 559-934-2168. So feel free to contact me if you have any questions or other input, and you're really shy or something. All right. Well, thank you. I'll record the call, and I'll make sure that downloads, and I'll send that all out to you all as well. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Karina.
Thanks. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you, Karina.
Thanks, you too.